I've been on the road for what felt like forever, ever since I took up trucking after the mill shut down back home in West Virginia. The Appalachians were my roots. Those misty hollows where the trees crowd and like they're listening, and every shadow in the woods could be a story your granddaddy warned you about. But bills don't pay themselves, so I traded the winding mountain roads for the endless flat stretches of the Midwest, hauling loads cross-country in my old Peterbilt. It was steady work, but lonely. My wife, Sarah, she'd call every night from our little house in the hills, her voice crackling over the cell signal, reminding me of the life I was missing. "Come home safe, Jed," she'd say, and I'd promise I would. That night in Nebraska was no different at first. Just another long haul, 12 hours straight from California, with a trailer full of fresh produce that needed to hit Chicago by dawn. My eyes were gritty, burning from staring at the white lines blurring under the headlights. Coffee wasn't cutting it anymore. I needed real rest. I spotted the sign for the rest stop off I-80, one of those forgotten places that hadn't seen maintenance since the Reagan years. It wasn't on my usual route, but the next truck stop was another 50 miles, and I was fading fast. The exit ramp curved down into darkness. No welcoming glow from sodium lamps. Just a faint outline of cracked pavement stretching into a wide, empty lot. Weeds pushed up through the fissures like fingers from the earth, and the air carried that stale, dusty scent of neglect. A couple of rusted-out semis sat at the far end, their trailers sagging on flat tires, probably abandoned by drivers who couldn't afford the tow. Graffiti scarred the old restroom building. Faded tags and warnings like "turn back" scrawled in what looked like charcoal. I pulled in slow, the rig rumbling over potholes that jar my bones. Parked as far back as I could, away from the highway's distant hum, figuring the isolation would help me sleep deeper. Locked the doors with a satisfying click, double-checked the cab alarm, and climbed into the sleeper berth. It was a cramped space, just a thin mattress in my duffel bag, but it was home on the road. I stripped down to my undershirt, the Nebraska night chill seeping through the metal walls, and lay there listening to the silence settle in. Out here, away from the mountains, the quiet was different. Not the soft rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl, but a vast, empty hush that swallowed everything. It pressed on you, made you feel small, like the prairie was watching. I thought of Sarah again, her warm bed back and hollow, and drifted off quicker than I expected. It wasn't a noise that woke me, not at first. It was more like a shift in the air, a prickling at the back of my neck, the kind of instinct you develop after years in the woods as a kid, knowing when something's out there, even if you can't see it. My eyes snapped open in the dark, heart already thumping steady. The digital clock on the dash glowed 2:17 a.m. I lay still, breathing shallow, straining to hear over the faint creak of the rig settling. Nothing, just that heavy silence, thicker now, like a blanket smothering the world. I rolled over, telling myself it was just road fatigue playing tricks the way your mind fills the void with phantoms. But then I felt it again, that watch sensation like eyes boring into the cab from outside. I sat up slow, careful not to make the berth springs squeak, and parted the curtain just a sliver. The lot stretched out under a sliver of moon, pale light casting long shadows from those derelict trucks. At first, everything looked still, frozen in time. Then I saw it, movement, subtle at first, a flicker in my peripheral vision, like something darting between the rusted semis. I blinked hard, rubbing my eyes, but there it was again, shadows shifting, elongated forms gliding along the pavement. They weren't cast by anything obvious, no clouds scudding across the moon, no wind whipping up debris. These were taller, almost humanoid, moving with a deliberate slowness, like they were patrolling the lot, circling in a wide arc. My mouth went dry. I thought maybe transients, homeless folks, squatting in the abandoned rigs, coming out at night to scavenge. I'd heard stories from other drivers, lot lizards turned desperate, or worse, folks gone feral from too long on the fringes. But this fell off. There were no trees close enough for branches to sway and cast those shapes, no animals big enough to mimic that gait. I watched, frozen, as one shadow detached from the side of an old trailer, stretching tall against the faded paint, then melting back into the dark. It was methodical, almost patient, like whatever was knew I was there and was taking its time. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the chill. I reached for my phone, thinking to call Sarah or even Highway Patrol, but the signal bars were dead. Nothing but that mocking no service icon. Out here in the flatlands, you might as well be in the deepest Appalachian holler. Civilization drops away quick. I told myself to calm down, that it was probably just my imagination, amplified by the isolation. But the shadows kept moving, drawing closer in their circuit, now maybe 50 yards from my rig. I could almost make out details, limbs too long, postures hunched but purposeful. A low hum started in my ears like blood rushing, or maybe something else, a vibration through the ground. I grabbed my flashlight from the side pocket, the heavy mag light that doubled as a club if needed. My hands shook as I flicked it on, the beam cutting through the cab like a knife. I aimed it out the window, sweeping slow across the lot. The light caught the weeds, the cracked asphalt, the rusted hulks of those forgotten trucks. But where the shadows had been, nothing. Just empty space, the beam illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I exhaled, a shaky breath, starting to feel foolish. Maybe it was wind, after all, or exhaustion conjuring ghosts from the prairie night. But as I scanned further, the light fell on the window of one of those old semis, the driver's side glass caked in years of grime. There, smeared through the dust, were handprints. Fresh ones, not faded like the rest of the filth, clear outlines of palms and fingers, pressed hard from the inside, as if someone had been trapped clawing to get out. Or watching. The prints were smeared downward like dragging, and too many for one person, overlapping, frantic. My stomach twisted. No way those were old. The dust around them was undisturbed, meaning they'd been made recently, maybe while I slept. Panic hit like a cold wave. I dropped the flashlight, fumbling to pick it up, my mind racing. Who? Or what could be inside that rig? Squatters? But why press from inside? And how without me hearing? I thought of the old tales from back home, the ones whispered around campfires in the mountains. Folks gone missing in the woods, turning wild, living like animals in the shadows. Out here, the prairie could do the same, drive people mad with its endless nothing, turn them into something not quite human. I scrambled back to the driver's seat, keys jangling in my hand. The engine roared to life, a comforting growl that shattered the silence. Headlights flooded the lot, bright halogens piercing the dark. I didn't wait, didn't log the hours or check the mirrors first. Just threw it in gear and eased forward, tires crunching over gravel. As I pulled away, I couldn't help but glance in the rear view. There, in the red glow of my taillights, those shadows reappeared, pausing at the edge of the lot, tall and still, like they were watching me go. Not chasing, not fleeing, just observing. A chill ran down my spine, deeper than the night air. I drove hard for the next hour, pushing the rig to its limit, until I hit a lit truck stop with other drivers milling about under the fluorescence. Pulled in, parked among the living, and sat there shaking, coffee cup trembling in my grip. Told a couple of old-timers about it over smokes, but they just nodded knowingly. That old stop off 80? Yeah, it's got a reputation. Folks see things there, shadows, prints, even hear whispers on the wind. Probably just drifters, but some say it's the land itself, remembering the ones it claimed. I didn't sleep much after that, just catnapped until dawn. Finished the run to Chicago, delivered the load, and headed back east, but I rerouted around that stretch of Nebraska. Never went back. Sarah noticed the change when I got home, said I looked haunted, like I'd seen something from the old stories. I told her it was nothing, just road wear, but at night, when the house creaks and the wind howls through the hollow, I think of those handprints, those watching shapes. Out on the prairie, or in the mountains, some places are like that. Forgotten corners where the world thins, and whatever lurks in the dark waits patiently for the next soul to stop. I wonder sometimes if they're still there, circling in the silence, pressing against the glass. And I pray I never find out. That experience has stuck with me, burrowing deep like a splinter you can't dig out. Back in the Appalachians, I'd always felt a kinship with the land, the way the ridges rise like ancient spines, hiding secrets in their folds. But Nebraska showed me that isolation doesn't need trees or fog. The flat horizon can swallow you just as easy. I kept trucking, of course, had to, for the money, but I changed my habits. No more pulling into abandoned spots, no matter how tired. I'd push to the big plazas with their buzzing lights and chatter on the CB, where the night felt less alive. Sarah worried more after that night. She'd pack extra sandwiches, slip a St. Christopher medal into my bag, whispering prayers as I left. "The road's full of ghosts, Jed," she'd say, echoing her mama's old warnings about the hollers. I laughed it off, but inside I knew she was right. Ghosts, or something like them. Echoes of the lost. Maybe drawn to those empty places. Months passed, and I tried to bury the memory, focusing on the rhythm of the highway. The thrum of tires, the flicker of mile markers, the static-laced voices on the radio sharing warnings about wrecks or weather. But one evening, as I crossed into Iowa on a similar run, the CB crackled with a story that pulled it all back. Some driver, handle Lone Wolf, was recounting his own encounter at that same rest stop. Pulled in late, saw shapes moving round the old rigs. He drawled, voice tinny over the airwaves. "Show my light." Nothing there, but handprints on the glass, fresh as morning dew. "From inside, boys. Swear on my mama." The channel went quiet for a beat, then erupted with half-jokes, half-serious tales. One guy mentioned a missing driver from years back. Rig found abandoned there with prints all over the cab. Another talked of whispers, like voices calling from the weeds. I keyed the mic, almost shared my piece, but held back. What good would it do? Some things are better left in the dark. Driving through the night now, I scan the shoulders more, watch for those forgotten exits. The prairie wind howls, sometimes sounding like distant calls, and I crank the radio to drown it. Back home, in the quiet of our cabin tucked against the hillside, Sarah and I sit on the porch, listening to the crickets and the rustle of leaves. She asks about the road, less these days, sensing the weight I carry. But on still nights, when sleep won't come, I stare at the ceiling and remember those shadows, patient, circling, waiting. Or were they? Drifters gone mad? Spirits of the roads forgotten? Or just the mind cracking under the vastness? I don't know, and that's the worst part. The not knowing lingers, a quiet dread that follows me like a shadow in the rear view. And sometimes in the dead of night, I wonder if they're still out there, pressing against the glass, hoping for the next truck to pull in. The trucking life grinds on, mile after mile, but that Nebraska stop changed how I see the world. In the Appalachians, we grow up with legends. The Mothman, the Bell Witch, stories that explain the unexplainable, give shape to the fear. Out west, it's raw, the land stripped bare, no folklore to soften the edges. I started researching when I could, late nights in motels with spotty Wi-Fi, digging into old forums and driver logs. Turns out that rest stop has a history. Built in the 70s, closed after budget cuts, but before that a string of incidents. Missing persons reports from the 80s. Hitchhikers last seen there, a family van found empty with doors ajar. One article mentioned squatters, a group of runaways who'd holed up in the rigs, but they vanished too, leaving only prints and scratches. Authorities chalked it up to transients moving on, but locals whispered about prairie wraiths, folks driven insane by the isolation, blending into the night. Rational me says it's all coincidence, the mind weaving patterns from chaos. But the feeling, that prickling awareness, tells a different story. I confided in Sarah eventually, over coffee one morning after a long run. Her eyes widened, hand tightening on mine. "Sounds like the wild ones, Jed," she said softly, invoking those old mountain tales of feral people lurking in the woods, surviving on instinct, watching from the trees. But out there, on the flat, God help him. We didn't speak of it again, but she started calling more, her voice a lifeline in the dark. I upgraded my rig with better locks, a dash cam, even a handgun tucked under the seat. Though what good bullets are against shadows, I don't know. The road calls me back, always does, but now I drive with one eye on the mirrors, waiting for that flicker in the dark. Years on, and I still avoid I-80 for Nebraska. Detour south or north, add hours to the log, but it's worth it. Other drivers ask why, and I shrug it off as superstition. But deep down, the fear simmers, a quiet, unsettling realism that some places aren't meant for stopping. They're traps, woven from silence and shadow, drawing in the weary. And whatever waits there, pressing handprint from the inside, it's patient. It doesn't need to chase. It knows someone else will come along, pulling tired and alone. I pray it's not you, because once you see those shapes circling, pausing to watch you leave, the dread never truly fades. It follows you home, into the hollows, into the night. Let's move to story 2. I'd always been a man of the mountains, born and raised in a little holler outside of Beckley, West Virginia, where the ridges rise up sharp and the fog clings to the trees like it don't want to let go. Growing up, my daddy taught me to listen to the woods, the way the birds go quiet when something's wrong, or how a branch cracking in the still of night can mean a bear, or worse, one of those folks the old-timers whispered about, the ones gone feral from living too long away from people. But life don't always let you stay put. When the coal jobs dried up and the kids needed braces and college dreams, I took to trucking. Long hauls across the country in my beat-up Freightliner, pulling dry goods or whatever paid. It was lonely work, sure, but it kept the lights on back home. My wife, Clara, she'd wait up for my calls, her voice soft over the static, reminding me of the porch swing and the way the fireflies danced in our yard come summer. "You be careful out there, Tommy," she'd say every time, and I'd laugh it off, tell her the road was safer than the mines ever were. That night in 2018 sticks with me like a burr under a shirt, the kind you can't shake loose no matter how you twist. I was running a load of canned goods from Dallas up to Amarillo, pushing hard through rural Texas on Highway 287. The land out there is flat and unforgiving, nothing like the rolling hills I'm used to, just endless scrub and mesquite stretching to the horizon, broken only by the occasional oil pump nodding like it's praying for rain that never comes. I've been behind the wheel since dawn, eyes gritty from the dust kicked up by passing rigs, and by midnight, I was fighting to keep the line straight. The next big truck stop was too far. I needed to shut down soon or risk nodding off at the wheel. Spotted a sign for a rest area, one of those old ones that looked like it hadn't seen a state crew in decades. The exit ramp dipped down into a wide gravel lot, surrounded by boarded-up buildings with plywood over the windows and doors, vending machines smashed open and gutted long ago. Weeds grew tall through the cracks, and the whole place had that forgotten feel, like the world had moved on and left it to rot. Unusual to see it empty. No other trucks, no cars, just silence under a sky full of stars that felt too bright, too watchful. I figured it was fine for a few hours. Locked doors and a CB radio were all a man needed. I pulled in slow, the gravel crunching loud under the tires, and parked toward the back, away from the highway's faint rumble. Did my usual walk around, checking the load secure and the tires good, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The air was warm and still, carrying the scent of dry earth and something faintly metallic, like old blood baked into the ground. Satisfied, I climbed back in, drew the curtains tight across the windows, and settled into the sleeper. It wasn't much, a narrow bunk with a thin blanket and my pillow from home, embroidered with Clara's careful stitches, but it was enough. I lay there listening to the rig tick as it cooled, the quiet wrapping around me like a shroud. Out in the Appalachians, night sounds are alive. Crickets, owls, the wind in the pines. Here, it was absolute nothing, a void that made your thoughts echo too loud. I thought of Clara and the kids, pictured them asleep in our little house nestled against the mountain, and let the exhaustion pull me under. Sleep came shallow, the kind where you're half aware of the world, and it wasn't long before something tugged me back. At first, I couldn't place it, just a faint disturbance like the air had shifted. Then I heard it, a soft crunch on the gravel, starting from the front of the trailer. Slow, deliberate. Crunch, pause, crunch, like footsteps, measured and unhurried, making their way along the length of my rig. My eyes snapped open in the dark, heart picking up a notch. Coyotes, I told myself, plenty out here in the scrub, sniffing around for scraps. But the steps were too even, too heavy for an animal. Human weight, pressing down just enough to displace the stones. I lay frozen, breathing shallow as they continued, past the drive tires along the passenger side, toward the back. The trailer was 53 feet long. It took time for whoever or whatever to circle it fully. When they reached the rear, there was a longer pause, like they were standing there, listening. Then it started again from the front. Another loop. My skin crawled, that old mountain instinct kicking in, the one that tells you when eyes are on you from the tree line. But there were no trees here, just open lot bathed in faint starlight. I sat up slow, careful not to rustle the curtains, and parted one just a slit with my finger. Peered out into the darkness. Nothing. The gravel stretched empty, shadows pooling under the boarded buildings, but no movement, no silhouette. Yet the footsteps kept coming. Crunch, pause, crunch, completing the second circle. Closer now, or maybe just felt that way inside the cab. I could almost sense the vibration through the floorboards, a subtle shift with each step. Sweat prickled under my arms despite the night chill seeping in. Who the hell would be out here pacing around my truck at this hour? Lot lizards didn't work places this dead, and thieves would have made noise breaking in. No, this was different. Patient, like they were wearing a path in the gravel, marking territory. I reached for the switch panel, fingers hovering over the exterior lights. Told myself it was nothing, just some drifter checking for easy pickings, but the steps didn't falter. Third circle now, slower if anything, the pauses longer. Crunch, longer pause, crunch, like they were stopping to press close to the side of the trailer, listening for me inside. My mind flashed to stories I'd heard on the CB from other drivers. Folks squatting in abandoned stops, gone half wild from the heat and loneliness, watching trucks pull them like predators in the brush. Or worse, echoes of those Appalachian tales Claire's grandma told about the wild people in the hollers, folks who'd wandered off and come back changed, if they came back at all. Out here, the land could do that to a person, strip you down until nothing human was left. Heart pounding steady now, I flipped on the lights. The floods came alive, bathing the lot in harsh white, turning night to day around the rig. I scanned quick through the slits, gravel gleaming, weeds stark, the old buildings glaring back empty. No one, not a soul in sight, no retreating figure ducking into the shadows. But the footsteps, they hesitated just for a beat, then resumed. Crunch, pause, crunch. Defiant, almost like the light didn't bother them at all. My breath caught. Whatever it was still out there, circling in the glare. I grabbed the CB handset, keyed it up, but the channel was dead static. No breakers, no good buddies, just white noise. Cell signal was gone too, bars flatlined. Isolated, truly alone in this forgotten patch of Texas nowhere. The circles continued, fourth, fifth. I lost count after a while, each one grinding on my nerves like sandpaper. The pauses grew longer, and once I swore I heard a faint scrape along the trailer's side, like fingernails trailing slow. My mind raced for explanations. Maybe a prank, kid from some nearby town messing with truckers. But no laughter, no voices, just that relentless pacing. It felt personal, targeted, like I'd been chosen because I was the only one stupid enough to stop here. The quiet between steps was worse than the noise, heavy with anticipation. I thought of honking the air horn, scaring them off, but held back, afraid to escalate whatever this was. Instead, I sat there in the bunk, tire thumper gripped tight in one hand, staring at the curtains as if they might part on their own. Time stretched, minutes bleeding into what felt like hours. The footsteps never sped up, never faltered, just that methodical loop, wearing grooves in the gravel. My thoughts turned dark, picturing Clara waking to a trooper at the door, telling her they'd found my rig empty, doors ajar. Or worse, not empty. The isolation pressed in, the vast Texas night swallowing any hope of help. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I lunged forward to the driver's seat, slammed my palm on the air horn. The blast ripped through the silence, loud enough to echo off the buildings and scatter any wildlife for miles. It roared for a good 10 seconds, my hand locked down. Then nothing. Absolute quiet. No retreating steps, no curses or shouts, just the sudden absence of sound, like whatever was out there had simply stopped. I waited, breath ragged, light still blazing. Minutes ticked by with no resumption. Slowly, cautiously, I killed the floods, plunging the lot back into dark. Lay down again, but sleep was impossible. Every creak of the rig, every whisper of wind set me on edge. Dawn came gray and reluctant, the sun peeking over the flat horizon like it was afraid to rise. I stepped out wary, coffee in hand, and did a slow walk around. That's when I saw them. Boot prints in the dust and gravel, deep impressions circling my entire rig, truck and trailer. Over and over, layers overlapping like a ritual path. Heavy boots, men's size maybe, pressed hard as if the walker had all night. But here's what chilled me to the bone. No tracks leading in from the entrance, none trailing out to the highway or buildings. Just perfect circles starting and ending at my rig, as if whoever it was had appeared from nowhere and vanished the same way when the horn blew. I stared at those prints for a long time, the morning light doing nothing to warm the dread settling in my gut. Reported it later at the next stop, some hotline for driver incidents, but they brushed it off, probably kids or a prank, they said. Nothing came of it, no follow-up. But I knew better. That pacing wasn't playful. It was possessive, like something claiming the space around me, waiting for me to step out or let my guard down. I've parked in lit lots ever since, big plazas with cameras and other rigs close by. Clara notices when I call now, hears the strain in my voice on quiet nights. "What happened out there, Tommy?" she asks sometimes, but I change the subject. Some things you don't bring home to the mountains. Years later, the memory still creeps up on bad runs, when the lot's too empty or the wind howls just right. I wonder about those prints, how they formed without approach or escape. Was it a person, driven mad by the endless flatland, circling like a moth to my light? Or something older, tied to the land the way the wild folk are whispered to lurk in our hollers? The not knowing gnaws, a quiet sorrow for whatever's out there, pacing alone in the dark. And on still nights, when I hear gravel shift under tires far off, I lock the doors tighter and pray the circle stay broken. Because deep down, I fear one day they'll start again. And this time, the horn won't be enough to make them stop. The road's full of empty places, waiting patient as shadows, and some footsteps never truly fade. Let's move to story 3. I've always been a mountain boy at heart, raised in a narrow holler near Harlan, Kentucky, where the hills crowd in close and the nights are full of sound you learn to read like a book. Branches snapping under deer, wind whispering secrets through the laurel, or the rare, wrong kind of quiet that means something's moved into your woods that don't belong. My mama used to say the mountains keep their own, and if you listen close enough, they'll tell you when to stay inside. But trucking took me far from those protective ridges, out across the wide open country where the land don't hide nothing and the sky presses down like it's trying to crush you flat. Amidst the trees, the way they broke the wind and gave a man places to look without feeling looked back at. Out west, there's nowhere to hide, and after a while you start to feel like the only living thing for miles. That night in Nevada still wakes me up sometimes, sweat-soaked, and reaching for the tire thumper I keep beside the bunk. I've been hauling refrigerated beef from Reno to Vegas, fighting a headwind the whole way across the state, the kind that sucks the fuel and wears your nerves thin. By 1 in the morning, my eyes were burning holes in my skull, and the next rail truck stop was still 2 hours south. I remembered an old rest area off the highway, one I'd passed 100 times but never stopped at. Closed since the 90s, the sign said, but the pull-off was still there, a wide patch of cracked asphalt with a cinder block restroom, buildings squatting in the middle like a forgotten tombstone. Broken picnic tables lay scattered around it, their benches splintered and bleached gray by the sun. I figured it'd do for a couple hours of shut-eye, better than nodding off on the shoulder and waking up wrapped around a guardrail. I eased the Kenworth down the ramp, the headlights sweeping over faded paint and tumbleweeds piled against the chain-link fence. No moon that night, just a sky so clear and crowded with stars it felt hostile, like a million eyes staring down without blinking. The desert air was cold and sharp when I killed the engine, carrying that dry, mineral smell that gets in your throat. I parked nose in toward the restroom building, maybe 50 yards away, close enough to see the boarded-up doors and the graffiti somebody had sprayed across the walls years ago. Mostly faded tags and the usual crude jokes, but one line stood out under my high beams. "Don't look behind." I laughed it off at the time, just kids being dramatic, but it stuck with me later. I locked the doors, drew the curtains, and climbed into the sleeper, the rig ticking as it cooled in the silence. The quiet out there wasn't peaceful like back home. It was empty, absolute, the kind that makes your own heartbeat sound too loud. Sleep wouldn't come easy. I kept feeling that prickle on the back of my neck, the same one I get as a kid when I'd stray too far up the ridge and realized the birds had gone still. The place felt watched, like something was waiting just out of sight for me to let my guard down. I told myself it was fatigue, the desert playing tricks, but the unease settled deep in my gut and wouldn't leave. I lay there staring at the ceiling of the bunk, listening to nothing, until maybe an hour later I heard it, a faint scraping sound, metal dragging slow across concrete, coming from behind the restroom building. Rhythmic, deliberate. Scrapey, pause, scrapey, pause. Like somebody dragging a chain or a piece of rebar along the ground, over and over. Coyotes don't make that noise, and there wasn't enough wind to blow loose metal around. I tried to ignore it at first, pulled the blanket over my head like a child hiding from the dark, but the sound kept going, patient as time itself. Minutes dragged by, and the scraping didn't stop or change pace. It was methodical, almost thoughtful, like whoever was making it knew I was listening and wanted me to know they were there. My mind started spinning stories the way it does when you're alone too long. Squatters, maybe living in the crawl spaces under the building, marking their territory. I'd heard tales from other drivers about folks out in the desert who'd gone strange from the heat and isolation, surviving on whatever washed up on the highway. Or worse, people who'd wandered away from wrecks and never found their way back to the world. The mountains have their wild ones, hidden in caves and forgotten mines. Maybe the desert had its own. The scraping continued, steady as a heartbeat, and finally I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed my phone for the flashlight, slipped on my boots quiet as I could, and eased the door open. The cold hit me hard, raising goose flesh under my flannel. I left the cab lights off, not wanting to announce myself, and stepped down onto the asphalt, the gravel crunching soft under my weight. The scraping stopped the moment my boots touched ground, like whatever was making it had heard me coming. Silence rushed back in, heavier than before. I stood still, letting my eyes adjust to the starlight, the restroom building a dark bulk ahead of me. Nothing moved. I told myself to get back in the truck, lock up, and drive on, but something stubborn rose up, the same stubborn that kept me from turning back when I was a kid hunting ginseng up trails my daddy warned me away from. I needed to see what was making that noise, prove to myself it was nothing. I moved slow along the edge of the building, keeping to the shadows, phone light off, but ready in my hand. The air felt thicker back there, stale and close, like it hadn't stirred in years. Trash lay scattered, old beer cans, sun-bleached plastic bags, a rusted shopping cart tipped on its side. I rounded the corner careful, heart thumping steady in my ears, and that's when I saw it. A tall figure standing maybe 20 feet away, back to me, perfectly still in the open space behind the building. Hooded jacket, jeans, average build, could have been any drifter at a glance. It wasn't doing anything, just standing there facing the fence and the empty desert beyond, arms hanging loose at its sides. The scraping tool lay on the ground nearby, a length of rebar glinting faintly. I froze, breath caught in my throat. Part of me wanted to back away, quiet, and pretend I'd never seen it, but another part, the part raised on mountain grit, wouldn't let me run without knowing. I clicked on the phone light, the beam cutting bright through the dark, pinning the figure in place. "Hey," I called, voice rougher than I meant. "You okay out here?" No answer. No flinch, no turn, nothing. The figure just stood there, bathed in the white glow, motionless as a fence post. The scraping had stopped completely, the desert silent around us. I took a cautious step closer, light steady. "Buddy, you need help? It's cold out here." That's when it moved, not fast, not sudden, but slow, deliberate. Its head turned, just enough for me to see under the hood. My stomach dropped like I'd stepped off a cliff. There was no face, just pale, Smooth skin stretched tight where features should have been. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Nothing but a blank expanse reflecting the light faintly, like wet stone. It wasn't a mask. The skin moved with the turn, natural as breathing, but there was nothing there to see, with nothing to speak or scream. The head kept turning a fraction more, as if it was listening or smelling or somehow knowing exactly where I stood. I don't remember dropping the phone, but suddenly the light was spinning on the ground, throwing wild shadows as I backed away fast, boots scraping loud now. My mind screamed at me to run, every instinct from the mountains telling me this was wrong. Wrong in the way only the deep woods can show you, something that shouldn't exist wearing the shape of a man. I stumbled around the corner, slammed against the rig, and yanked the door open, hauling myself inside and locking it with shaking hands. The engine roared to life before I even thought about it, headlights flooding the lot as I threw in gear and peeled out, tires spitting gravel. I didn't look in the mirrors until I was back on the highway, doing 80 with the pedal buried, and even then I couldn't bring myself to check if something was standing in the red glow of my taillights. Dawn found me at a busy truck stop south of Tonopah, parked under bright lights with other rigs idling around me like a herd for protection. I didn't sleep, just sat chain-smoking and drinking bad coffee until the sun was high enough to burn away the night. When the CB started crackling with morning chatter, I asked around casual-like about that old rest area. A few old-timers knew it, said transients hold up there sometimes, cooking meth or hiding from warrants, but nobody mentioned seeing anything like what I saw. One driver got quiet, though, and told me some places out in the desert collect things, broken people who wander off the highway and lose what made them human. Ain't ghosts, he said, staring into his coffee. Just what's left when the land takes its toll. I never went back that way if I could help it. Rerouted loads to avoid that stretch entirely. Told my wife, Ellie, some of it over the phone, but left out the worst parts. She worries enough with me gone half the month. She's from the mountains too, grew up hearing the same stories I did about things that watch from the tree line. And I could hear the fear in her voice when she told me to pray before I sleep in strange places. I do now, every night on the road, a habit I picked up after Nevada. But prayer don't erase the memory of that blank face turning slow in the light, or the way it stood so still, like it had all the time in the world. Some nights, when I'm parked in empty lots far from home, I catch myself listening for scraping sounds or watching the shadows behind buildings that shouldn't have anything behind them. The desert and the mountains are different worlds, but they both keep secrets, and they both take pieces of people who linger too long. I still drive, still chase the miles, but part of me wonders if that thing is still out there, standing patient in the dark, waiting for the next hired driver to pull in and step out for a look. And I wonder what it wants, what it's listening for with no ears, watching with no eyes. The not knowing sits heavy, a sorrow I carry like an extra load, because whatever it wasn't lost. It knew exactly where it was, and maybe deep down, it was waiting for someone like me to find it. Story 4. I come from a little place tucked up in the hills of eastern Kentucky, where the hollers run deep and the trees grow so thick the sun has to fight its way down to the ground. Folks back home always said the mountains hold memories, old feuds, lost souls, things that never quite left when they should have. My granddaddy used to sit on the porch after supper, rocking slow, telling us kids to listen close at night, because the wind carries voices if you know how to hear them. I laughed it off back then, young and full of myself, thinking the real world was out there on the open road, not hiding in the laurel thickets behind our cabin. But after what happened in Oklahoma, I don't laugh anymore. Some voices travel farther than you'd ever expect, and they don't always stay outside. I've been trucking for about 8 years by then, running dry van loads wherever the broker sent me. It paid the bills and kept my family fed, my wife, Ruth, and our 2 girls back in Holler. Ruth hated the long hauls, hated me being gone weeks at a time, but she never complained much. She'd just kiss me goodbye on the porch, press a little cloth bag of mountain sage into my hand, and whisper, "Keep this close, Dale. It'll ward off what don't belong." I'd smile and tuck it in the glove box, more for her sake than mine. That night in Oklahoma, though, I wished I'd kept it on me. The storm rolled in fast, the way they do on the plains, black clouds swallowing the sky, wind whipping the rain sideways until the wipers couldn't keep up. I was hauling furniture from Tulsa to Dallas on I-44, already pushing 10 hours, eyelids heavy as wet wool. The radio kept cutting out with severe weather alerts, and every big truck stop was still miles ahead. Then I saw the sign for an old rest area, one of those places the state abandoned years ago when they built the new plazas. Overgrown, no lights, no facilities, just a cracked concrete pad with a couple picnic shelters and a low brick building boarded up tight. But it was off the highway, sheltered a little by a stand of scraggly oaks, and the rain was coming down so hard I could barely see the lines. I figured I'd park, ride it out, catch a few hours before dawn. I pulled in slow, tires hissing on the wet pavement, and nosed the rig toward the far end where the oaks gave some cover. The lot was empty, water pooling in the low spots, weeds bending under the downpour. I killed the engine and sat there a minute listening to the storm hammer the roof, steady, relentless like fists on a coffin lid. The sound lulled me some, reminded me of rain on our tin roof back home when I was a boy. I locked the doors, drew the curtains, and crawled into the bunk with my boots still on, too tired to strip down. The air was thick with that wet earth smell that sneaks in no matter how tight you seal the cab. I lay there staring at the underside of the sleeper ceiling, letting the rhythm of the rain pull me under. I don't know how long I slept, maybe an hour, maybe less, when the whispers started. At first they were so faint, I thought it was bleed from the CB, some late-night chatter leaking through the speakers even though the radio was off. Low, muffled voices, rising and falling under the drumming rain. I shifted in the bunk, trying to tune them out, but they kept coming, threading their way through the vents like smoke. Men's voices, I thought, maybe two or three, too quiet to make out words. I sat up slow, rubbing my eyes, and strained to listen. The storm was still raging, wind howling around the trailer, but those voices were separate, closer, intimate, coming from inside the cab somehow. Through the vents, yeah, but not like outside noise. They were inside the airflow, riding it right to my ears. I told myself it was imagination, the kind of trick your mind plays when you're bone-tired and alone. But then the words started to surface, fragments cutting through the static of the rain. He's here. A pause, then softer, wait for him. My blood turned to ice water. I froze, breath shallow, every muscle locked tight. Another voice answered, lower, almost conversational. Soon as he sleeps, I couldn't move, couldn't think. The whispers kept on, patient, like people talking just below a window, waiting for the right moment. They weren't loud, never rose above the storm, but they were clear enough to understand, and that made it worse. Clear enough to know they were talking about me. I grabbed the Big Mag light from under the bunk, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Hands shaking, I parted the curtain a crack and peered out. Rain sheeted across the windshield, the lot a blur of gray and black. Water streaming off the trailer like a river. No shapes, no movement, just empty pavement and the dark wall of oaks swaying in the wind. I checked the passenger side, same thing. Nothing. Nobody could be out in this storm without lights or shelter, and sure as hell nobody was close enough to whisper into my vents. Yet the voices continued, drifting in on the air, circling me in the cab. He's awake now, one said, almost amused. Doesn't matter, another replied. He has to sleep sometime. I don't scare easy. Grew up hunting in country where a wrong step can send you down a drop-off, face down more than one sketchy hitch lot situation with nothing but a tire thumper and attitude. But this was different. This felt personal, invasive, like something had crawled inside my rig with me and was biding its time. I thought of transients hiding underneath, maybe clinging to the frame or crouched under the trailer, speaking up through the vents to mess with a lone driver. I'd heard stories, desperate folks in bad weather doing whatever it took to get inside a warm cab. Or worse, people who didn't want money or a ride, just company of a permanent kind. The whispers grew closer, more intimate, like the speakers were pressing their mouths right to the vents. I could almost feel their breath mixing with the damp air I was pulling into my lungs. I flipped on every light I had, cab lights, floods, markers, turning the rig into a beacon in the storm. The voices paused, just for a second, then resumed softer conspiratorial. I cranked the engine, letting it idle loud, hoping the vibration would shake loose whoever was clinging below. Grabbed the CB handset and keyed up, breaking squelch over and over, but the channel was dead. No weather net, no other drivers, just static. The storm had cut me off from the world. I sat there behind the wheel, lights blazing into the rain, engine rumbling, and listened as the whispers went on. They never got angry, never threatened, just talked about me like I was already theirs, waiting me out. I thought about stepping outside, shining the light underneath, confronting whatever was there. But the thought of opening that door, of dropping down into the floodwater with those voices waiting, I couldn't do it. Instead, I eased the rig forward, slow at first, then faster, pulling out of the lot and back onto the highway without ever shutting down. The whispers followed for a while, faint under the roar of the engine and the slap of tires on wet pavement, then faded as the miles grew between us. Dawn came pale and watery, the storm finally breaking up as I rolled into a busy travel plaza near the Texas line. I parked among a dozen other rigs, engines idling and drivers milling around with coffee, the normal sounds of the road washing over me like a balm. I didn't sleep, just sat sipping burnt diner coffee until the sun was fully up. When I finally felt steady enough, I climbed out and did a slow walk around in the daylight. That's when I saw them, faint, foggy handprints on the outside of the intake vents low on the trailer, a dozen or more, overlapping like several people had pressed close and breathed hot against the metal in the cold rain. Smallish hands, some bigger, smeared where they'd shifted position. No mud, no dirt, just the misty outlines left by warm breath on cold steel, right where sound would carry upward into the vents. I stared at those prints a long time, the morning light doing nothing to ease the chill that settled in my bones. Washed them off eventually with a bottle of water, watching the fog dissolve and run down the side of the trailer like tears. Never told the lot attendants, never filed a report. What would I say? That voices whispered me out of a rest stop? That invisible people left breath marks on my rig? They'd think I was crazy or on something. But I know what I heard, and I know those prints were fresh. Ruth noticed a change when I got home a few days later. I was quieter, jumpier, checking locks twice and sleeping light. She asked what happened, and I told her most of it. Left out the worst parts, the way the voices said my name once, soft as a prayer. She just held me close on the porch that night, the mountains dark and familiar around us, crickets singing in the grass. Some things follow the wind, Dale, she said finally, but they can't climb these hills easy. You're safe here. Maybe she's right. I still drive, still take the long hauls, but I don't stop in empty places anymore, especially not in rain. I keep to the big plazas with lights and cameras and other souls close by. Some nights, though, when a storm rolls in and the rain hammers the roof of our little house, I wake up listening for whispers threading through the vents, patient and waiting. I tell myself it's just the wind in the pines, carrying echoes from far away. But deep down, I wonder if those voices are still out there on some forgotten stretch of highway, crouched in the dark, breathing soft against cold metal, waiting for the next tired driver to pull in and close his eyes. And I wonder if one day the mountains won't be high enough to keep them out. The road teaches you a lot of things, but the hardest is that some invitations you never mean to give, and some company, once noticed, never truly leaves you alone. Story 5. I was born and raised in a little hollow outside of Clintwood, Virginia, where the mountains fold in on themselves like they're guarding secrets older than the coal seams running beneath. Folks there don't talk much about what's in the woods after dark, but everybody knows to respect the quiet. When the crickets stop and the dogs won't bark, you get inside and bolt the door. My daddy was a logger before the mines took him, and he'd come home with stories he only told once, in low voices by the fire, about lights moving where no trail was, or knocks on cabin walls when the wind wasn't blowing. Some things want company, he'd say, staring into the flames, and they don't take no for an answer. I figured those were just tales to keep kids from wandering, the way all mountain families have their warnings. But the road has a way of teaching you that some stories travel, following back roads and forgotten turnpikes until they find you miles from home. Trucking pulled me out of those hills when the mines shut down for good. I bought an old International with everything I'd left after Daddy's funeral and started hauling whatever loads paid. Steel coils, produce, furniture, didn't matter. It kept food on the table for my mama and sent money to my sister raising kids alone. The long nights on the highway got lonely, sure, but there was a rhythm to it I came to rely on. The hum of tires, the glow of dash lights, the occasional chatter on the CB breaking the silence. Pennsylvania Turnpike runs were some of my regulars, cutting across the state with its rolling hills that almost felt like home, though the trees were different, taller pines mixed with oak and ridges that opened up instead of closing in. That night, I was dead tired, pushing 12 hours from Jersey with a trailer full of boxed appliances headed to Pittsburgh. Rain had followed me most of the way, a cold drizzle that made the road slick and the wipers hypnotic. By midnight, my eyes were crossing the kind of bone-deep fatigue that makes the white lines blur together. The big travel plazas were packed or too far ahead, so when I saw the exit for an old rest stop, one of those pre-turnpike relics the state never bothered to tear down, I took it. The ramp curved down into a wide lot choked with weeds pushing through cracked asphalt. The restroom building a squat concrete shell with boarded windows and doors kicked in long ago. Graffiti scarred the walls, faded swear words, and gang tags half washed away by years of weather. A couple rusted picnic tables sat crooked on their foundations, and the whole place had that air of abandonment, like time had moved on and left it behind. I pulled in slow, headlights sweeping over the emptiness, and parked toward the back with a lot met a line of trees. Real trees, not just scrub, their branches dripping in the mist. No other rigs, no cars, just the steady patter of rain on the roof as I shut down. I did my walk around out of habit, boots splashing in puddles, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Everything secure, tires good, no signs of life. The air smelled of wet leaves and distant wood smoke, reminding me of home in a way that should have been comforting but wasn't. I climbed back in, locked both doors firm, and drew the curtains before settling into the bunk. The rain drummed steady overhead, a familiar lullaby from childhood nights in our little cabin when storms rolled through the hollow. I lay there thinking of Mama, how she'd be asleep now with the Bible on her nightstand, and let the sound pull me under. Sleep came quick but shallow, the kind where dreams mix with waking. I don't know how long I was out, maybe an hour, maybe two, when the knocking started. Soft at first, polite almost, 3 measured taps on the driver's door. Tap, 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 like someone requesting entry, not demanding it. My eyes opened in the dark, heart giving one hard thump before settling into a faster rhythm. I lay still listening. Lot lizards sometimes work these places, or transients looking for a handout, but not in this weather, not here. The knocking came again, same rhythm, same spot. I sat up slow, careful not to make the springs creak, and parted the curtain just enough to peer out the window. Rain streaked the glass, the lot of wet gleam under my marker lights. Nothing. No figure huddled against the door, no shadow retreating into the dark. Just empty pavement and the trees swaying gentle in the wind. I waited, breath held, but the knocking didn't return right away. Told myself it was a branch blowing against the side, or maybe ice falling from the mirror. Anything normal. I was about to lie back down when it started on the passenger side. Tap, tap, tap. Same steady pace, like the same person had walked around the cab without me hearing footsteps on the wet ground. My skin prickled, that old mountain feeling of being watched from the tree-line. I slid over to the passenger window, peeked through the slit. Again, nothing, just rain and darkness, the boarded building squatting silent in the distance. The knocking paused, long enough for me to hope it was over, then moved to the trailer's side, fainter but unmistakable against the thin metal walls. Tap, 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 traveling the length of the 53-footer, slow and deliberate. This wasn't right. Nobody walks the full length of a trailer knocking in a storm unless they're up to no good, or worse. I grabbed my voice and yelled through the window, "What do you want?" I'm not opening up. My words echoed back flat in the rain. Silence followed, thick and heavy, broken only by the drip of water from the eaves. I waited, tire thumper in hand now, ready to swing if a face appeared at the glass. Minutes passed, 5, maybe 10, with nothing but the storm. I started to relax, chalking it up to imagination or some prankster long gone, when the knocking resumed from underneath. Muffled, dull thuds against the undercarriage, directly below the cab. Thump, 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 like fists pounding up from below, or something clinging to the frame, trying to get attention. Fear hit me hard then, the kind that roots you in place. Underneath? In this weather? Nobody could be down there without me seeing them climb under when I parked. I flipped on every light I had, headlights, floods, work lights, turning the rig into a glowing island in the dark lot. The beams cut through the rain, illuminating puddles and weeds, the building stark white in the glare. Still nothing visible. I revved the engine hard, letting it roar and shake the whole chassis, hoping to dislodge whatever was clinging below. The knocking paused again, but only for a moment, then resumed, slower now, almost mocking, spreading along the trailer as if multiple sources were taking turns. I couldn't stay. Panic clawed at me, visions of hands reaching up through the floorboards or something waiting for me to step out. I threw the rig into gear and eased forward slow, tires crunching over gravel, watching the mirrors for any shape darting away. That's when I felt it, a slight bump under the drive tires, soft but unmistakable, like rolling over a thick branch or a bag of laundry. The knocking stopped instantly. I slammed on the brakes, heart in my throat, staring at the side mirrors. Nothing moved in the lights. Rain kept falling, washing the lot clean. Part of me knew I should get out and check, make sure I hadn't hurt someone. But the greater part, the part raised on stories of things that lure you out of safety, kept my foot off the brake and on the gas. I accelerated away, merging back onto the turnpike without looking behind, driving until I hit the next open plaza 20 miles down, bright with semis and travelers in life. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, just parked under the lights with other rigs idling around me, and sat chain-smoking until morning. When the sun came up gray and weak, I did a thorough inspection. That's when I found the scratches, long, deep gouges along the undercarriage, clustered near the fuel tanks and cross members, like fingernails had raked hard trying to hold on. Fresh metal shone through the grime, some curled at the ends where they'd caught and dragged. I called the state police from the plaza, reported it vague-like as vandalism, and they sent a trooper out. He looked it over, scratched his head, and said probably raccoons or a bear looking for food, though he admitted bears weren't common that stretch. Animals do strange things when desperate, he told me, but his eyes didn't quite meet mine when he said it. I know better. Animals don't knock polite on doors before trying to crawl inside with you. Animals don't follow a pattern like they were raised with manners once. Whatever was under there wanted in or wanted me out, and when I rolled forward, it held on as long as it could. I think about that bump sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn when the road's empty and the trees close in along the shoulder. I think about what might have been left behind in that wet lot, scratched and broken, but maybe not gone. The mountains taught me some things don't die easy, and some hungers follow you no matter how far you drive. Mama noticed when I came home that trip, said I looked like Daddy after his bad days in the woods, eyes too wide and jumpy. I told her some of it left out the worst, and she just held my hand tight, her fingers rough from years of garden work. The world's full of empty places, son, she whispered. Some are empty cause nothing wants them. Others are empty cause something's waiting to fill them. I don't stop at derelict places anymore, no matter how tired. I push through to the lights and the people. Keep the sage Ruth gave me. No, Mama now hangs on the mirror. But on rainy nights when the wipers beat steady and the highway stretches dark, I swear I hear it sometimes. Faint knocking from below, patient as ever, traveling with me. And I wonder if one day it'll knock again when I'm too tired to drive away, or if whatever I rolled over that night is still holding on somewhere in the dark underneath, waiting for me to stop. The road's long, and some company you pick up never lets go. Story 6. I grew up in a little cabin off a dirt road in Mingo County, West Virginia, where the hills rise so steep you can almost touch the sky if you climb high enough, and the nights are thick with the kind of darkness that swallows sound. My people were cold folk, quiet and hardy, the sort who didn't speak much of what they saw in the woods, but knew to leave offerings of salt or tobacco at certain old stumps when the dogs refused to cross a ridge. Grandma called them the Watchers, folks who'd gone into the mountains long ago and never came all the way back out, changed by the isolation and the hunger until they weren't quite people anymore. They'd watch from the tree-line, she said, eyes catching what little light there was, waiting to see if you were alone enough to approach. I was a skeptical kid, more interested in getting out than listening to old tales, but those stories burrow deep, and when you're far from home on a lonely stretch of highway, they have a way of rising up like fog from hollow. Trucking was my escape from the dying mines, a way to see the country and send money back to Mama and my little brother still stuck in school. The Midwest runs always felt strangest, flat land that goes on forever, cornfields and soybeans replacing the protective embrace of the ridges. No places to hide, no trees thick enough to break a stare. Iowa in particular, with its endless horizon and overpasses looming like giant skeletons over the interstate. I've been hauling canned goods from Omaha to Des Moines that trip, fighting a yawn for the last 100 miles as the clock crept past 2 in the morning. The big plazas were full or closed for repaving, and my eyes were burning holes in my head. I remember an old rest area just past an overpass, one the state had boarded up years back but never fenced off. Figured it'd be quiet, empty, good for a quick meal and a cat nap before pushing on. The exit ramp curved down under the concrete shadow of the bridge, the headlights picking out faded signs warning no services and closed. The lot was wide and cracked, weeds tall enough to brush the bumper. The restroom building a low brick box with plywood over the doors and windows, graffiti bleeding down the walls in Rain Street colors. A single sodium light flickered weakly at the entrance, buzzing like a dying insect, but the rest was dark. I pulled in slow, tires crunching over broken glass and gravel, and parked facing the building, far enough back that the overpass loomed overhead like a cave mouth. No other rigs, no cars, just me and the faint hum of distant traffic high above. The air was cool and still when I cracked the window, carrying that Midwestern smell of turned earth and distant rain. I killed the engine, locked the doors out of habit, and settled in the driver's seat with a ham sandwich Mama had packed back home, the bread still soft, and the meat cut thick like she knew I'd need something real to hold me over. I ate slow, staring out at the empty lot, the weak light casting long shadows from the picnic tables that had been chained together years ago. The quiet was heavy, not the alive quiet of the mountains with its crickets and owl calls, but a dead hush that made every chew echo in the cab. I was halfway through the sandwich when I noticed it, a faint reflection in the side window, just at the edge of my vision. Eyes, multiple pairs, glowing soft like animal shine, catching the dash lights, but too high off the ground for coons or coyotes. I turned my head quick, but they were gone, leaving only the empty window and my own face staring back pale. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, told myself it was fatigue playing tricks, the kind of thing that happens when you've been staring at white lines too long. Road hypnosis, they call it. I took another bite, forcing myself to relax, but the prickle on my neck wouldn't leave. Minutes passed, the sandwich finished and wrapped back in its wax paper. I was about to climb into the bunk when they appeared again, closer this time, in both side windows at once. Pairs of eyes, low glow like embers spaced out around the cab as if several somethings stood just outside the glass, staring in from different angles. Not blinking, not moving, just watching. My breath caught sharp, sandwich forgotten. They were human height, or close, too tall for animals, too still. I stared hard, willing them to resolve into branches or reflections off the overpass, but no. They held steady, faint but unmistakable, catching the interior light and throwing it back. Then, as quick as they came, they vanished when I shifted in the seat. Gone. The lot outside looked empty again, just weeds swaying faint in a breeze I couldn't feel. My heart was thumping now, that old mountain instinct kicking in, the one that tells you when the birds go quiet and something's moved into your space. I drew the curtains tight, one by one, blocking out the windows until the cab felt smaller, safer. But even with the fabric pulled, I could feel it, the weight of being watched like pressure against the glass. The air grew thick, close, and then I heard it, soft breathing outside, synchronized, coming from all sides. In and out, slow and deliberate, like a group exhaling together just beyond the metal skin of the rig. Not loud, but close enough to carry through the thin walls, through the cracks around the doors. I sat frozen in the bunk, tire thumper gripped, white-knuckle tight, listening as the breathing continued, patient, unhurried, waiting for me to make a sound or a move. Time stretched, the breathing never faltering, never drawing closer or fading away. It was intimate in a way that made my skin crawl, like they were tasting the air inside with me. I thought of squatters, folks living rough under the overpass or in the boarded building, coming out at night to surround lone trucks. I'd heard whispers on the CB about places like this. Desperate people gone strange from too long on the edges, watching drivers sleep, waiting for a chance to slip inside. Or worse, echoes of grandma's watchers, eyes shining from the dark, but out here with no trees to hide in, just open ground and concrete. The breathing went on, soft and steady, and I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I grabbed the thumper, heavy steel that could crack a skull if needed, and eased the door open, stepping down fast into the cool night, swinging wide in a circle. Get back. I see you. My voice echoed off the overpass, sharp and lone. The thumper cut empty air, whooshing through nothing. I spun, flashlight beam from my phone, stabbing the darkness, under the trailer, around the tires, toward the building. Empty. Not a soul. Not a rustle of weeds or retreating footstep. Just the faint buzz of that dying light and the distant rumble of a semi high above on the bridge. The breathing had stopped the moment I opened the door, silence rushing back in like water into a hole. I stood there panting, scanning every shadow, but the lot was deserted. No eyes now, no movement. Relief started to creep in, shaky and thin, until I turned back to the rig. The windows, driver's side, passenger, even the small ones high on the doors, were covered in smudges. Greasy prints at eye level all around. Overlapping hand marks and forehead smears where faces had pressed close, leaving oily residue from skin on the glass. Fresh, unmistakable, like a crowd had gathered while I sat blind inside, peering in, breathing soft against the cab. My stomach turned cold. Those prints hadn't been there when I parked. I'd have noticed during my walk around. I didn't think twice. Jumped back in, locked up tight, and fired the engine, pulling out fast with tires spitting gravel. As I hit the ramp and merged onto the interstate, I glanced in the mirrors one last time. There, in the red glow of my taillights, fading into the lot, faint outlines, tall, still shapes standing at the edge of the pavement, watching me go. Not chasing, not waving, just watching until the dark swallowed them. I drove straight through to the next plaza, parked under bright lights with other drivers coming and going, and didn't sleep until sunrise. Asked around casual on the CB the next day, mentioned the old stop under the overpass. A few old-timers knew it, said, yeah, squatters sometimes hold up there, or worse, folks who've been riding the rails and dropped off, living in the shadows. Best not to stop alone, one said, voice crackling. Some places collect eyes. I laughed it off on the air, but the words stuck. Mama saw the change when I got home, said my eyes looked farther away, like I'd seen something the mountains had warned me about. I told her pieces, left out the breathing and the prints, and she just nodded slow, rocking on the porch as the sun set behind the ridge. The watchers are everywhere, baby, she whispered. Not just our hills. They follow the lonely roads, too. I still drive, still chase the miles to keep the family afloat, but I don't park alone anymore, no matter how tired. I push to the lights and the crowds, keep a brighter flashlight and the thumper closer. Some nights, though, when the cab's quiet and the windows fog from my breath, I catch myself checking the glass for smudges that weren't there before. Or I feel that prickle, like eyes just outside the curtain, waiting patient for me to draw it back. I wonder about those shapes in the mirrors, if they're still under that overpass, gathered in the dark, breathing soft and synchronized. waiting for the next set of headlights to turn down the ramp, the next lone driver to stop and eat a sandwich. And I wonder if one day, no matter how many lights I park under, they'll find a way to watch again. The road's wide open out there, and some things don't need trees to hide behind. They just need you to be alone long enough to notice they're already there. Story 7. I come from a tucked-away holler in Pike County, Kentucky, where the ridges stand guard like old sentinels and the nights are so dark you can feel them press against the windows of the house. My family's been there since the land was settled, scraping a living from the coal and the ginseng, learning early to listen to the mountain the way sailors listen to the sea. Grandpa used to say that some places are thin, where the veil between what's here and what watches from the edges wears through, and if you're foolish enough to linger in one alone, something might try the latch. He'd tell it quiet, whittling on the porch while the dogs whined and refused to cross the yard after sundown. I was young and restless, thought those stories were just to keep us close to home. So when the mine started closing and the bills piled higher than the snow on the ridge, I bought a used Kenworth and took to the road. Trucking paid steady, let me send money back to Mama and keep my younger sister in community college. But the road teaches its own lessons, and some of them echo the ones I left behind in the hills. Arizona was always the strangest stretch for me. Nothing but red rock and sand stretching to the horizon. The sky's so big and clear at night, it feels like you're floating in it. No trees to break the wind, no hollers to hide in, just open emptiness that makes a man feel small and noticed. I was running a load of electronics from Phoenix to Albuquerque that trip, the kind of high-value freight that keeps you alert, but 12 hours in, the fatigue was winning. The big truck stops were miles behind or ahead, and the clock was pushing past midnight when I spotted the faded sign for an old rest area. One the state had closed decades ago, but never bothered to gate. Just a wide pull-off with a couple concrete picnic shelters bleached bone white by the sun, a low cinder block building boarded up tight, a lot big enough for a few rigs to turn around. The stars were out fierce, millions of them scattered like salt on black velvet. No moon to soften the dark. It looked peaceful enough, isolated and silent, the kind of place where you can actually sleep without the rumble of idling diesels all around. I eased down the ramp, tires humming soft on the cracked asphalt, and parked far back from the highway, nose pointed toward the open desert so I could pull out quick if needed. Did my walk around like always, checked the locks on the trailer, kicked the tires, swept the flashlight across the shadows under the rig. Nothing. No trash blowing, no footprints in the dust. Just the faint scent of creosote and cold stone. The air was crisp, carrying that dry desert bite that gets into your lungs. I climbed back in, locked both doors solid, habit from too many sketchy lots, and drew the curtains before crawling into the sleeper. The cab still held the day's warmth, and I lay there listening to the rig tick as it cooled, the silence wrapping around me like a blanket. Out here, the quiet was different from the mountains. No insects, no leaves rustling, just the vast hush of the land waiting. I thought of Mama rocking on the porch back home, probably worrying even though I called for Flagstaff and let the stillness pull me under. Sleep came quick, the deep kind that drops you like a stone, but something dragged me back up hours later. A faint metallic click, then a soft lift and rattle at the driver's door handle. Slow, deliberate. Lift, settle, lift again. Like someone testing the resistance, feeling if it would give. My eyes opened in the dark, heart giving one hard thud before settling into a faster rhythm. I lay perfectly still, breath shallow, every sense straining. The handle lifted again, paused longer this time, then released with the tiniest click. No footsteps on the gravel, no voice calling out, just that patient, methodical testing. I whispered into the dark, voice barely above the blood in my ears. Who's there? No answer. Just another slow lift, pause, release. Then silence. Long enough that I started to hope it was the cold making the metal contract, or maybe a dream bleeding into waking. But then it started on the passenger side. Same rhythm, lift, settle, lift, careful, almost gentle, like whoever was out there had all night and didn't want to wake me too soon. My skin went cold, that old mountain prickle crawling up my spine. Nobody moves from one side of the cab to the other, that quiet on loose gravel. not without boots scraping or breath huffing in the chill. I sat up slow, careful not to rustle the curtains, and reached for the light switches. Hands trembling just enough to notice, I flooded the lot. High beams, floods, marker lights, everything blazing white against the desert night. The sudden glare poured through every gap in the curtains, turning the cab stark and shadowless. I peered out through the slits, first driver's side, then passenger. Empty. The lot stretched pale and lifeless under the lights. Picnic shelters standing like tombstones, the boarded building staring back with its blind plywood eyes. No figure ducking away, no silhouette frozen in the open, just nothing. Yet the rattling continued. Slow lifts on the driver's handle again, as if the lights meant nothing, as if whoever was out there knew exactly where the locks were and how much pressure to apply without triggering the alarm. Minutes dragged by, 5, maybe 10, with that steady testing, moving back and forth between the doors, patient as a man picking a lock he's got all the time in the world to open. My mind raced through possibilities. Kids from some nearby reservation messing with truckers, or worse, someone desperate enough to try for the cab and whatever was inside. But no voices, no laughter, no hurried retreat when the lights came on. Just a quiet, methodical jiggle, pause, jiggle like they were learning the feel of the mechanism, memorizing it. Fear settled deep, the kind that makes your stomach knot and your thoughts scatter. I thought of the stories back home, how the old one said certain folk who'd lived too long away from people would come down from the ridges at night, trying doors on cabins that sat too far out, looking for warmth or company or something nobody liked to name. Out here in the desert, the land does the same to people, dries them out, strips away what keeps them civil. I grabbed the tire thumper from under the bunk, heavy steel cold in my grip, and finally lost my patience. I slammed my fist against the driver's door hard enough to rattle the whole cab and yelled, voice cracking, "Get the hell away from my truck!" The banging echoed across the empty lot, loud in the silence. And just like that, the jiggling stopped. No retreating footsteps, no curse or scuffle, just abrupt, total quiet. I sat there, breathing hard, lights still blazing, waiting for something to move out there in the glare. Minutes passed, maybe 20, with nothing but the low hum of the idling engine I'd started without realizing. The desert gave nothing back. No wind, no animals, just the stars wheeling slow overhead. Eventually, I killed the floods, leaving only the markers glowing soft, and tried to settle again, but sleep wouldn't come. I lay rigid, listening for any repeat, thumper across my chest like a rifle. Dawn crept in pale and rose-colored, the kind of desert sunrise that makes the rocks glow like embers. When it was light enough to see clear, I stepped out wary, boots crunching on the gravel that hadn't made a sound hours earlier. That's when I found the marks. Fresh scratches ringed both door handles, deep gouges in the paint and metal, some curling inward where a tool had slipped and dug. Pry marks, clear as day, like someone had worked a Slim Jim or a flat bar slow and careful, testing for give without making noise. Not hurried scratches from a junkie desperate for a fix, but deliberate, practiced lines, as if whoever did it had done this before and knew how to take their time. No footprints leading away, no tire tracks but mine, just those marks and the faint imprint of knees in the dust beside each door like someone had knelt close for a long while, working quiet. I stood there a long time, staring at them. The morning sun doing nothing to warm the chill that had settled in my bones. Washed the handles down with a rag and some water, but the scratches stayed, shining raw against the faded paint. A reminder that won't buff out. I drove on Albuquerque, delivered the load, and never mentioned it to the receiver or the cops. What would I say? That someone tried my door slow in the night and left no trace but prime marks and knee prints? They'd think I was seeing things, or worse. Mama noticed when I got home a week later, said I jumped at shadows and checked the locks 3 times before bed. I told her some of it, the parts one could put into words, and she just held my hand tight, her fingers rough from years scrubbing coal dust that never quite came out. "The thin places ain't only in our mountains, baby," she whispered. "They're wherever a soul stops long enough to be noticed." I avoid the remote stops now, push through the fatigue to the big plazas with cameras and other rigs close by. But some nights, parked safe under bright lights with engines idling all around, I still hear it in my head. That slow lift, settle, lift again. And I wonder if whatever knelt beside my doors that night is still out there, walking the empty highways under those merciless stars, trying handles quiet as breath, waiting for the next hired driver to pull over alone, to lock up tight and think himself safe. Because out in the open, isolation cuts both ways. Sometimes it protects you, and sometimes it leaves you exposed to things that have learned how to wait. And I fear one day I'll feel that jiggle again, slow and patient, when there's no one around to hear me yell. Story 8. I was raised in a little cabin up a forgotten hollow near Boone, North Carolina, where the Blue Ridge Mountains crowd and so close you can hear the creek talking to itself long after dark. My people were quiet folk, the kind who knew every trail and every story that went with it. Tales of children lost in the woods generations ago, their voices still calling on foggy nights, or families who built too far up the ridge and one morning just weren't there anymore. Mama said the mountains don't give back what they take, and if you hear crying in the distance, you turn the other way because some things were a child's voice to draw you out. I grew up listening, learning to tell the difference between a bobcat scream and something that almost sounded human. But life pushed me down out of those protective hills. Coal was gone, logging too dangerous after Daddy's accident, so I took to trucking. Long hauls up and down the East Coast. 95 mostly, sending money home to keep the cabin from falling in and to help my sister with her nursing school. The road's lonely, but it's honest work, and I always figured the real dangers were drunk drivers or black ice, not the kind of quiet dread that waits in overgrown places. That night in the Carolinas still sits heavy on me, like a stone in the chest I can't cough up. I was running a load of textiles from Georgia to Virginia, pushing hard to make time, the kind of run where you fight sleep like it's an enemy. Past midnight, somewhere south of Fayetteville, the rain had turned to a thick mist that swallowed the headlights whole. The big plazas were packed or too far ahead, and my eyes were burning. So when I saw the faded sign for an old rest stop, one shuttered years back after too many incidents, I took the exit. The ramp dipped down into a wide lot choked with kudzu and young pines pushing through the pavement. The restroom building a low concrete slab with rusted doors hanging open and windows smashed out long ago. Weeds grew tall around broken picnic tables, and the whole place had that feel, like the world had moved on and left something behind to keep watch. Spanish moss hung from a couple scraggly oaks, swaying faint in the damp air, reminding me of home in a way that should have been comforting but wasn't. I pulled in slow, tires hissing on wet leaves, and parked facing the building, maybe 70 yards off, close enough to see the dark openings of the doorways yawning like mouths. No other trucks, no cars, just me and the mist curling low over the ground. I did my walk around out of habit, boots squelching in the mud, flashlight beam cutting through the fog. Everything secure, no signs anybody had been here in years except the usual graffiti and beer cans. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, thick with that Carolina humidity that clings to your skin. I locked up tight, drew the curtains, and climbed into the bunk with my clothes still on, too tired to change. The rig ticked as it cooled, and I lay there listening to the mist patter soft on the roof, thinking of Mama probably awake worrying, her Bible open on the table like it could keep trouble from the door. Sleep came quick, the heavy kind that drops you straight down. I don't know how long I'd been out when the crying started, soft at first, so faint I thought it was part of a dream. Childlike sobs, muffled and distant, carrying on the damp air like they were coming from far away. My eyes opened slow, mind still fogged, and I lay there trying to place it. Wind maybe, or a cat in heat out in the weeds. But it persisted, rising and falling in that heartbroken way only a young one can cry, echoing faint off the concrete building. I sat up careful, heart picking up a notch, and parted the curtain just enough to peer out. The lot stretched gray in the mist, the restroom building a darker shape against the trees, its open doors black holes. Nothing moved. No small figure huddled in the shadows. No flicker of movement. Just the crying, clearer now, floating across the pavement like it was drawing closer on its own. I told myself it was imagination, the kind of trick your mind plays when you're alone in a bad place. The mist carrying echoes from the highway, or some animal making a noise I'd never heard. But the sobs kept on, patient and grieving, pulling at something deep in my chest the way a lost child's cry always does. Then the tone shifted, still soft, still muffled, but words started to thread through. Help? Please? Over and over, weak and pleading like whoever it was had been calling for a long time and was running out of strength. My blood ran cold. Against every bit of sense my upbringing had drilled into me. Never follow a strange cry in the dark. I grabbed my big mag light and eased the door open, stepping down into the chill mist. The ground was soft under my boots, mud sucking at the soles as I shone the beam toward the building. "Hey," I called, voice rougher than I meant. "You out here? You hurt?" The crying paused, just for a beat, then resumed softer, almost relieved, coming from inside the restroom now. Those black doorways swallowing the light. I took a few steps closer, beams sweeping the weeds, the broken tables, the walls scarred with old spray paint. Nothing. No small footprints in the mud. No child crouched in the shadows. Just the echo of those sobs drawing me like a hook. I stopped maybe 30 yards out, that mountain instinct screaming at me to get back in the truck, lock up, and drive away. Mama's voice in my head, turn the other way. But the pleading kept on, "Help me. Please, mister," and something paternal twisted in my gut, the part that remembered my little sister at that age, scared of thunderstorms and holler ghosts. I shone the light straight into the men's side doorway, the beam cutting deep but fading into nothing. Empty stalls, broken mirrors glinting, trash scattered across the tile. No one. The crying seemed to come from the women's side now, faint and retreating, like whatever made it was moving deeper into the building. I stood there frozen, light trembling just enough to dance the shadows. Every story from home flooding back. Children lost in the woods, their voices used to lure the kind-hearted after them. I backed away slow, boots heavy in the mud, and climbed back into the cab, locking up with shaking hands. The crying continued outside, circling the rig now, soft and desperate, sometimes close enough to sound like it was right at the window. I sat behind the wheel, engine idling low, trying to talk myself calm. Probably a recording, kids with a speaker messing with truckers, or echoes from somewhere else carried weird on the mist. But it felt too real, too heartbroken. Minutes turned to an hour, the pleading never stopping, never getting louder or angry, just wearing me down like water on stone. Finally, when I couldn't stand it anymore, I eased the rig forward, headlights cutting twin tunnels through the fog, and pulled out without looking back. The crying faded slow behind me, lingering on the air until the highway noise swallowed it whole. Dawn broke gray and drizzly as I hit a busy plaza near the state line, parked among other rigs and people, the normal sound washing over me like cool water. I didn't sleep, just drank coffee and stared at the lot until full light. When I felt steady enough, I stepped out for a walk around, and that's when I saw them. Small footprints in the soft dirt beside my truck, bare feet by the look of them, leading from the passenger side straight to the restroom building and back again, overlapping like someone had paced the path more than once. Child-sized, deep enough to show weight, but no mud tracked into the cab, no signs of climbing. Just those tracks starting and ending in my rig, as if whoever made them had appeared and vanished with the mist. I stared at them a long time, the plaza noise fading behind me, a quiet sorrow settling in where fear had been. Erased them careful with my boot before anyone else saw, but the image stayed burned in my mind. Asked around later on trucking forums, vague-like about that old stop off 95. Got a few replies, said it had a bad history going back decades. People vanishing, cars found empty with doors open, a child lost there in the 80s whose body never turned up. Locals avoided it, said voices carried on the wind sometimes, drawing folks in who were never seen again. Mama noticed a change when I got home, said I looked like I'd heard something I shouldn't have. Eyes haunted the way Daddy's got after his close call on mine. I told her most of it, left out the footprints, and she just held me on the porch that night, the mountains dark and safe around us. Some cries ain't meant to be answered, son. she whispered. "They're echoes the land keeps, waiting for the kind-hearted." I still drive I-95, still make the runs to keep the family going, but I don't stop at shuttered places anymore, no matter the weather or how tired I am. I push through to the lights and the voices of other drivers. Some nights, though, when the mist rolls in thick and the highway quiets, I swear I hear it faint on the wind, a child's soft sobbing, pleading for help just out of reach. And I wonder if those footprints are still there in the mud, waiting for the next set of headlights to turn down the ramp, the next weary traveler to step out with a light. I wonder what might have happened if I'd walked all the way to that building, if something small and lost would have taken my hand and led me inside. The sorrow lingers quiet and deep for whatever's trapped in that place, child or echo, or something wearing a child's grief like a mask. And I pray the mist never carries it far enough to find me again, because some calls you answer only once, and the mountains taught me long ago that not everything crying in the dark wants to be saved. Some things just want you to follow. Let's move to last story. I was born in a little holler outside of Harlan, Kentucky, where the mountains rise up sharp and unforgiving, and the fog can roll in so thick you can't see the hand in front of your face. Our cabin sat at the end of a dirt track that washed out every spring, and folks said it was too far up for company, which suited us fine. Daddy worked the mines until the black lung took him slow, and Mama kept the place going with a garden and what odd job she could find. We grew up hearing the old stories about travelers who vanished on the back roads, or vans that appeared out of the mist with no plates and no sound, following lone cars until they turned off somewhere quiet. "Don't stop for strangers in the dark," Mama would say, her voice low as she mended clothes by lantern light. "Some things ain't looking for directions." I figured those were just tales to keep us safe, the way every mountain family has warnings about the woods. But the road has its own legends, and when you're hauling freight across the country, far from the protective ridges, those stories have a way of finding you. Trucking came natural after Daddy passed. I needed to keep money coming in from Mama and my kid brother, who was still in high school dreaming of getting out. I bought a secondhand Peterbilt with a sleeper big enough to call home half the month, and started running loads wherever they paid best. The Rockies were some of my favorite stretches, those high passes with pine forest crowding the shoulders and air so thin and clean it almost hurt to breathe. But altitude plays tricks too. The cold seeps deeper, the fog clings longer, and empty places feel emptier, like the land's holding its breath. That night still wakes me sometimes, heart racing before I even remember why. I was hauling frozen goods from Denver to Salt Lake, the kind of reefer load that keeps you checking temps every few hours. I've been climbing steady into the mountains, the highway winding through canyons where the rock walls rose straight up on both sides. Past midnight, fatigue hit hard, the kind that makes the dash lines blur and your eyelids feel weighted. The next rail truck stop was over an hour away, and I spotted a sign for an old rest area, one abandoned after an avalanche took out part of the access road years back. The state never reopened it fully, just left a wide pull-off with a couple picnic tables chained together and a low stone building for restrooms, doors padlocked and windows dark. High altitude, foggy and cold even in summer, but it was sheltered by a stand of aspens and pines, and the lot was big enough to turn around easy. I eased down the ramp, the fog swallowing my headlights as I coasted in, tires humming soft on the cracked pavement. Parked toward the back, facing the exit for a quick getaway, and killed the engine. The silence rushed in immediate and heavy, broken only by the faint tick of cooling metal and the whisper of wind through the trees. Fog pressed close, turning the world gray and formless, the pines looming like shadows at the edge of sight. No other vehicles, just me and the mist. I did my walk around quick, checked the reefer unit, kicked the tires, swept the flashlight under the trailer. Nothing but damp ground and fallen needles. The air was sharp, carrying that high mountain bite mixed with pine sap. I climbed back in, locked the door solid, and settled into the bunk with a thermos of coffee gone cold hours ago. Thought of Mama probably asleep now, the cabin quiet except for the creek, and let the fog's hush pull me towards sleep. I was drifting, not quite out, when I heard it, the faint crunch of tires on gravel behind me, slow and deliberate. My eyes opened in the dark, instinct sharpening. In the mirrors, through the rear window of the sleeper, I saw headlights off. No lights at all. Just the shape of an old van coasting down the ramp silent. Engine barely above idle, pulling in behind my trailer and stopping maybe 50 feet back. Boxy silhouette, 70s maybe, paint faded to a dull gray in the fog. It sat there idling low, exhaust faint in the cold air, but no doors opened, no interior light flicked on. I watched, breath shallow, waiting for someone to step out. Maybe another driver needing a spot, or locals looking for trouble. Minutes passed, 5, then 10, with the van just sitting, engine rumbling soft like a distant growl. Unease started to build, that mountain prickle at the back of the neck. Out here at altitude, fog muffles everything, but I should have heard doors or voices, footsteps on gravel. Nothing. I sat up slow, peering through the slit in the curtains. The van's windows were dark, tinted or filmed with grime, impossible to see inside. Then the engine cut off abrupt, plunging the lot into deeper silence. Still no movement, no slam of doors, no flicker of a cigarette lighter. Just the shape parked behind me, blocking the way out a little, though the ramp was wide enough to maneuver around if needed. I told myself it was nothing, just someone else grabbing a nap, but the way it had coasted and lights off stuck wrong. Time stretched, the fog thickening until the pines faded to ghosts. I tried to settle again, but sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the rig sounded louder, every shift of wind through the aspens like a whisper. Then I saw it in the mirrors. Faint movement inside the van, silhouettes shifting slow behind the windshield. Tall shapes, more than one, leaning forward or side to side like they were watching my trailer. Not getting out, not smoking or stretching, just watching. My skin crawled. I flipped on the exterior lights, floods bathing the lot in harsh white, turning the fog to glowing mist. The van sat illuminated, old and rusted, no plates visible on the front, windows still dark. The silhouettes froze, then settled back, indistinct again. No reaction to the light, no wave or retreat. Heart thumping steady now, I started the engine, letting it idle loud to announce I was awake and leaving. Eased forward slow, swinging wide to clear the trailer around the van. As I straightened for the ramp, headlights caught the van side mirror, and movement. It started up too, no lights, just a low rumble as it pulled out behind me, close but not tailgating aggressive. I hit the highway, fog parting reluctant around the rig, and checked the mirrors. There it was, following at a steady distance, no headlights cutting the dark, just a shadow in the mist. I sped up gradual, watching it match pace, not closing fast, not falling back, just holding there like it knew my route. The highway climbed higher into the pass, empty of other traffic this late, canyons dropping off sharp on one side. Minutes turned to miles, the van always in the mirrors, a silent pursuer. My mind raced. Highway robbers, maybe, waiting for me to pull over again, or to something worse. The kind of story you hear whispered at truck stops about vehicles that appear out of nowhere and follow lone drivers into the wild. I thought of calling on a CB, but the channel was dead static up here, altitude or rock walls killing the signal. Cell bars flatlined too, isolated, truly cut off. The following went on for what felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes. The van never aggressive, never flashing lights or honking, just present, a constant shape in the fog. Unease turned to real fear, the targeted feeling sinking deep. Why me? Why this empty stretch? I pushed the rig harder, reefer humming, tires singing on the curves. Finally, as the road widened into a long straightaway descending toward lower elevation, I floored it, building speed until the van started to fade in the mirrors, swallowed by distance and mist. Lost it around a bend, the highway opening up with faint signs of civilization ahead, distant lights of a small town. I didn't stop until I hit a lit plaza near Grand Junction, parked under floods with other rigs idling and drivers milling about. Sat there shaking, coffee long forgotten, until dawn painted the mountains pink. Asked around casual the next morning over breakfast, mentioned the old van, no lights, following out of the rest area. A couple old-timers went quiet, exchanged looks. Said, yeah, stories about a van like that up in the high passes, lurking at abandoned stops, coasting in silent behind lone trucks. Some drivers claimed it followed them for miles before vanishing. Others said it appeared out of fog with shapes inside, just watching. No one knew who or what. Runaways maybe, or folks gone strange from living off-grid too long in the Rockies, targeting travelers for reasons nobody wanted to guess. I never saw it again, rerouted to avoid that stretch when I could. Told Mama some of it over the phone, left out the worst, and she just sighed like she'd known it would catch up to me one day. The watchers don't stay in the hollers, son, she said soft. They follow the roads now, looking for folks far from home. I still drive the Rockies, still chase the miles to keep the family going, but I don't pull into empty high places anymore, no matter the fog or how tired. I push through to the lights and the company. Some nights, though, when the mist rolls and thick up a pass and the mirrors are full of gray, I feel it, that targeted prickle like something's coasting silent behind me, waiting for me to stop. I wonder about those silhouettes, shifting slow inside a dark van, patient as the mountains themselves. Were they lost or hunting, desperate, or something the high country changed? The confusion lingers, a quiet sorrow for whatever rides those empty roads, appearing out of fog to follow the alone. And I pray the mist never brings it close enough again, because some company you sense before you see, and once it's chosen you, the road feels longer, the night's colder. The mountains taught me long ago that not everything following wants to pass. Some just want to see where you'll stop next.